Hello everyone, this is Yash, a member of Software Development Group, COPS IITBHU. Now that we have created our Django project, we are still not done. The project is only accessible when the development server is run locally. We still need to make it available to others and accessible through the web. So in this video of the Django Learning series, I will be guiding you towards the deployment of the Django web app on a web server. We will be using Heroku for deployment as it provides us with a free tier in which we can deploy at max 2 projects with maximum select size of 500 MB. Heroku also provides us with its own PostgreSQL database which we will be needing to effectively deploy our project and our database. Before we get to the main deployment part, we still need to complete some basic setups so that we are able to deploy without any errors. The first of which is completing the pip file. Make sure that while you are creating the project, you always keep the requirements.txt updated. How will you be able to do that after starting deployment? I will tell you right now. So first of all, to complete the pip file without having to copy paste from the requirements.txt, I recommend that you delete the pip file. Also, I will be using the pip file to deploy on Heroku, and it will be using the dependencies and packages from the pip file to install it in the Heroku system. And I will not be using pipfile.log to install the dependencies. So that is why I will be deleting the pipfile.log, and I recommend that you also use the pip file and not the pipfile.log to deploy on Heroku, because it is not always possible to keep the log file updated. And if you can keep the log file updated and with all the dependencies present, then you may also use the log file directly to deploy on Heroku. Now to get the pip file back, we will start our virtual environment using pip-env, and as you can see, it automatically creates the pip file for us with the same dependencies and packages that are present in requirements.txt. Now, to avoid any errors, it is recommended that we do not mention the version codes but a single star in the pip file for the dependencies and packages. So these are the packages that we had installed for our project, but to deploy we will need a few more packages. So first of them is gunicorn, and the second is psycop2. So as you know, we are running the development server and running it locally, but to deploy we need a web server and we need to run it on a web server. So gunicorn provides us with that facility, and we will not be able to use the SQLite database when we deploy it on the web. So to have a proper database, we need to use the PostgreSQL database that Heroku provides us with. So for that we need psycop2 to use the PostgreSQL database. Now that we have updated our dependencies and the packages, I personally would add an extra package called white noise. So white noise is basically that allows us to include images and other files into our web app of Django when we deploy it on Heroku, because when we run it locally it might be working, but on Heroku it might not. So in case you have a lot of images and you want them to be perfectly be placed and perfectly be available on the web app also after deployment, white noise is preferable. Another package that some people have errors with is the pillow package. So it allows us to store images in the Django database. So if you are storing some images or other files in your Django database after deployment, you will need a few extra packages to be installed in the Heroku system so that you can use those features. So pillow and white noise are one of those dependencies that you need to install. Now that the dependencies and the packages are all set, we can install those using pip env install. It will automatically again create the pip file .log for us, but for deployment I will not be including it in my commit, so that I can have a proper deployment. Although we can use the pip file.log if it is properly updated, but I'm not counting on it. That's why I will directly install through the pip file and not the pip file.log. And also, if the pip file is present, then Heroku automatically uses the pip file and not the requirements.txt. In case the pip file is not present, then Heroku will use requirements.txt to install all the dependencies and packages. So if you want to use the requirements.txt, you need to include these dependencies and extra packages in the requirements.txt also, with their proper version codes present in the requirements.txt. Since we are using pip file, we do not need to use the version codes. Now, it is also recommended to add the runtime.txt file into the project, so that you can specify the specific version of Python that you want Heroku to use for all the work related to the project. So in case you do not mention a specific Python version, then Heroku will use the default version, which might be Python 3.10, and or it might be some other version. So in case your project needs a specific version of Python to be run to run all the packages, and it might show error in some other version, then it is recommended that you mention the specific version. In my personal opinion, the Python 3.8.13 version is perfect, and it allows you to install all the dependencies that you require without any errors in the Heroku. Now that we have installed the basic dependencies and packages related to the project, we have one more very important dependencies to install in our system, which is the Heroku CLI. So I installed it using Snap. You may use some other method or some other procedure to install Heroku, or through some other system. So I'll personally use Snap, so I would recommend you also use Snap. After installing Snap, you can run this command to install Heroku. So the Heroku classic CLI will be installed. Now let me show you how to use gunicorn to run the web server for your project. So type the command gunicorn, then the name of your project, that is the name of this folder, local library .wsgi. So when you run this command, the gunicorn starts up, and on this URL you can see that we are able to access our project. And now it is not specifically running on the development server, but running through gunicorn. So now we also need to use Heroku local to run our project locally. Let's see Heroku local. As you can see, we got some error. This is because Heroku does not know what to do when we run this command, because when we run Heroku local, it needs to use this command to run the server for our project. For that, we need to create in the root directory the file name proc file, and in the proc file we need to specify this command, so that we are able to use Heroku to run the deployment server, and Heroku itself will be able to only be able to use this command to run our project when it has been deployed. So proc file is extremely important so to deploy the project. Make sure you include a space between the colon and gunicorn, and also a space between G unicorn and the command. So because people run into errors in writing this command here, so make sure you have written it correctly. Now that we have done the basic setup, we are completed with all the basic setup for deployment, we may start the deployment process for Heroku. The first thing is we need to log into Heroku. To log in, we write the command Heroku login. It asks us to press enter to start the web browser to log in. So press enter. And log in. Since I had already logged in, so it did not ask me for the credentials, but you may have to type in your credentials after creating a account with Heroku. Now we need to create our project. So run the command Heroku create. Now you need to mention the name of your project. Make sure that it is unique. So let's say I'll name it local library Django, and if it is available and not being taken by anyone else, then I will be assigned the name. As you can see, the name has already been taken, so I'll just change it. I'll make it local library Django YT. So yes, as you can see, the project was created, and if we go to Heroku, the project has been added. So we have successfully created the project and the app on Heroku. Now let's set the, as you can see, we have also a remote git repository of Heroku where the basic deployment will take place. So let's set the git remote to this repository. So we will run the command Heroku git remote -a. Now the name of your project, which is local library Django YT. We have set the remote also to this particular repository. Now before we move forward, let's try to run Heroku local. So we have already created a proc file, so now we will be able to run this command. So we run Heroku local, and as you can see, the server has started and we have gotten some URL. So let's access it, and we can see that the project is running properly. So you might run into some error while accessing that URL. So for that purpose, currently in deployment phase, I have added this. In single quotations, you have to add a star. So when you add a star in the single quotations in allowed hosts, all the URLs will be accessible and there will be no error while this is present in the allowed hosts. So this is only for the deployment purpose, development purpose. In deployment, we only have to specify specific URLs. So to ensure that only through the specific URL of the website it is accessible, we will add that URL. So the URL will be local library Django YT. So the name of your project that you have given to the project. So since I have given this name, this will be the base name. Now we will add the domain, which is Heroku app.com. You may also add localhost and the specific URL for like to run the development servers or the local host, but I will not be running it right now, so I'm adding the only the main URL to the settings.py, and that is what we require. So before moving on, since we are starting the deployment process, let's set debug to false, because we do not want debug to be true after deployment, as others will be able to view the errors and the code from through it, and it will be vulnerable, our project will be vulnerable. So, and let's start setting up the settings.py for the final deployment. Make sure that the static URLs and the static root are set in the settings.py, because if they are not set, then Heroku will give some errors. So it is preferable to set those URLs. Also, since we are in India, it is best if we set the time zone to Asia Kolkata and use and put this as false, so that it's not using the default, and the time zone is set to Asia Kolkata. So it is my personal setting, but you may also use it. Now we also need to configure our database, as we will be using the PostgreSQL database of Heroku. So we need to properly configure it. First thing we need to change is we need to change SQLi to PostgreSQL. Now we will need the name for our database, the host, the port, the user, and the password. So these are the basic requirements that we need to mention to use the PostgreSQL database of Heroku. So let's go to our app in Heroku. Now under settings, we have to reveal the config bars to be able to access the PostgreSQL configurations. Now you may be wondering that currently we do not have any variables available with us. This is because we have not yet pushed our code into the Heroku app, and Heroku has not yet configured PostgreSQL for us. So first we need to push our code to Heroku. So the command that we will be running is git push Heroku main. Before that, make sure that all the changes that you have made, prop file, the pip file, everything, you have pushed it and committed it. You have committed it and pushed it. So let's name it setup and let's commit. So we have committed the changes, and let's push it also to the remote. Now as you can see, we have committed and pushed to the remote. Now we will be able to push those changes along with the entire code to Heroku. So the command is basically git push Heroku main, but in case you are using another branch to deploy, suppose I use a branch name deploy to deploy the branch to Heroku. So I will be using this command to deploy it to Heroku. In case I do not use this, Heroku will automatically assume that I am using the main branch, and it will push to the main branch of the remote that it had created. So let's push. Heroku will install the dependencies through the pip file. If we did not have a pip file, then it would have used the requirements.txt file. And if we did not have the if we did have the pipfile.log file, then it would have only used the pipfile.log file and none of the others. Now this is the slug size. This is around 80 MBs. So maximum this can be is 500 MBs. So if it exceeds 500 MBs after compressing, then you will not be able to deploy in Django. Since this is a small project, it is able to deploy it in within 500 MB range. And also it also depends on the dependencies and the packages that you install for Python. So suppose you have TensorFlow installed, then it will definitely exceed 500 MB because TensorFlow is a heavy package, or PyTorch in case you install it. So you will not be able to deploy in Heroku for free if you have those dependencies or packages. Now let us go to the Heroku app and check for the Postgres variables. So as you can see, now it has appeared, database URL, and let's copy this URL. So since we need to configure it over here, I'll just copy it here. So firstly, name. So name is this part, so just copy it and put it here. Now the host is everything after @till.com. This is the port. Now this part after the slashes is the username, and this part after the username and the colon is the password. This is all we need to configure the PostgreSQL database for us, and let's save it. Now we need to push it again, so let's commit. And push it again to Heroku. Also, since we had added a white noise middleware, so we may add this command over here to ensure that it is using white noise as a middleware to effectively use the images. So you may add this command after adding that dependency. I did not add it then, but I can add it now. Since I do not have the requirements for it, I'll not be pushing it right now. Now as you can see, it has been pushed and we have been given a URL where the Django project has been deployed. But we are not done yet. We still need to make the migrations on the Heroku app for our project. So we will run the command Heroku run python manage.py migrate to migrate all the database and the tables that relations we had created. So this will allow us to migrate. So to run commands for your project directly on Heroku, you just need to use the Heroku run command, and then the command that you would use for your project, and you will be able to run that command on Heroku. Now let's access our project. So we were given a URL, so this is the URL, but you may directly access the project through your app on Heroku and click on open app. So as you can see, our project has been deployed. We have been given a URL of Heroku, and as you can see, this is the same name, the host name that we had mentioned here. So if we had not mentioned this here, then we would not have been able to access the URL through the web. So this allows us to access it, and the this configuration, the Postgres configuration, allows us to create and access the database. And after migrating, we are able to access the tables and relations without receiving any error from Heroku. Now, in case you want to add data to your database and you want to create a user, you may run the command Heroku run python manage.py create super user. And you may create a super user directly on Heroku database. So this will be used to create a super user. Also, in case you ever make changes to your project after deployment, so as I had already shown, I have this change still pending, so I just will commit it. Push it. We do not really need to push it, but I like to keep it updated. So after committing, you just have to simply run this command again, and the deployment process will again, the build process will again take place, and Heroku will deploy the updated app. So using these basic setups and basic methods, you will be able to deploy your Django project on the web without receiving any errors and without any problem. And in case you want to check if your project is running properly before deployment, you may run this command Heroku local anytime and check if it will run after deployment. So that will allow you to debug your errors and debug your code, and you will be able to deploy your project without any errors. So that is all for the Django learning series, and if you did like the video, then like and subscribe. Thank you.